Prime Minister Tan Sri Muhyiddin Yassin has promised an expansionary budget with a substantial amount to be set aside to handle the pandemic and provide the necessary support for frontliners. Quoting the PM, Bernama reports that Budget 2021, which will be announced on Friday, November 6th, is part of the government's 6R plan, namely Resolve, Resilience, Restart, Recovery, Revitalize and Reform. Besides health, the plan is to aid the vulnerable and pandemic-hit enterprises, both individual and micro, as well as stimulate economic and business activities. The government will also churn out incentives to attract FDI to further boost the country's economy. According to Muhyiddin, Budget 2021 is a continuation of the 4 previous stimulus packages worth 305 billion ringgit and will be Putrajaya's most comprehensive budget ever. He noted that the increase in the debt to GDP ratio from a limit of 55% to 60% provides ample room for such a budget. Maybank Kim Eng's economic research had forecast a deficit of 90 billion ringgit or 6% of GDP compared with an estimated 95 billion ringgit or 6.7% of GDP in 2020. For perspective, the budget 2020 was worth 297 billion ringgit. CGSCIMB research says a windfall tax on the glove sector will be difficult to execute since the prices of gloves are not standardized. The research firm explained in its note today that gloves pricing depends on types, specifications, product grades, and intended target markets. So, should the tax materialize in Budget 2021, it would likely be a one-off payment to the government. Concerns have been mounting that Putrajaya will implement a windfall tax on glove makers to pad its coffers amid the economic uncertainties. According to CGSCIMB, its sensitivity analysis found that a 5% hike in the corporate tax rate could slash the sector's 2020 net profit by 6.5%, but would enable the government to raise an extra 593 million ringgit in taxes. It estimates that glove companies under its coverage are already expected to pay a cumulative 2.8 billion ringgit in corporate income tax for 2020 and 4.7 billion ringgit for 2021. It also cautioned that a windfall tax could drive these companies to expand overseas, resulting in a potential opportunity loss for the government. The FBM KLCI settled 3.16 points or 0.22% higher at 1,464.61 today after 4 consecutive days of decline. The local stock market was lifted as investors weighed Bank Negara Malaysia's decision to maintain the overnight policy rate at 1.75% and in anticipation of the outcome of the US presidential election. 7.3 billion securities worth 3.36 billion ringgit exchanged hands today, with gainers outpacing decliners at 702 to 377. To recap, B&M decided to hold the OPR as Malaysia's economic activity is seen improving further, while underlying inflation is expected to remain subdued. This helped improve investor sentiment. Globally, share markets whipsawed, rattled by uncertainty as US President Donald Trump goes head-to-head with Democratic rival Joe Biden in a tight race for the White House. At the time of reporting, Trump has claimed victory even as counting continues, while Biden has declared that the Democrats are on track to win. The Science, Technology and Innovation Ministry has estimated that 3 billion ringgit is required to procure COVID-19 vaccines for Malaysians. Its Minister Khairi Jamaluddin told the Dewan Rakyat today that he has informed the Finance Ministry to set aside the said amount next year. At least 70% of Malaysians need to be immunised. Earlier, when responding to Papar MP Ahmad Hassan on the guarantee of the vaccine adequacy, Khairi disclosed that the government has had and is still in the midst of negotiations with vaccine developers worldwide, including China's government. China's Foreign Minister Wang Yi had on October 13th announced that Malaysia will be a priority recipient of the China-produced COVID-19 vaccine. Putrajaya, meanwhile, is in the final stages of negotiations to participate in the COVID-19 Global Vaccine Access Facility, under which the ceiling price is set at $21 or 87 ringgit and 50 cents per dose. Malaysia reported 1,032 new COVID-19 infections today, bringing the total number of cases to 35,425. Meanwhile, 820 patients were discharged, taking the tally of recoveries to 24,815 or 70% of total cases. There were 8 deaths, with 7 from Sabah and 1 from Perak, raising the death toll to 271. Malindo Air has refuted allegations of pocketing SOCSO benefits, stating that whatever sums received from the agency were distributed in full to its employees. The airline company clarified in a statement that under the Employment Retention Program, it received 1.27 million ringgit for April, which was credited in mid-May and disbursed to 2,112 staff. It added that another 1.49 million ringgit was received in late June and credited to 2,478 employees accordingly. When SOCSO discontinued the ERP and replaced it with the Wage Subsidy Program scheme, Malindo Air said only 196 staff benefited from the scheme. In total, 235,200 ringgit was received for June and July, which SOCSO only disbursed in late August and September. The COVID-19 pandemic has caused a deep erosion in the group's cash flows, forcing it to cut costs by halving its fleet via the transfer of 20 aircraft and carrying out a voluntary separation scheme for 349 staff and a long-term unpaid scheme for a further 439. It has retrenched 1,861 employees.